All right, good morning. We are convening the 9:15 a.m. agenda of the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. It is Thursday, February 16th, and we're in conference room 325 and also on live streaming and on Zoom. First bill on the agenda this morning is House Bill 345 relating to the environment. This specifies that no law, rule, or ordinance or code, including the state building code, should prohibit or limit the acceptable use of a refrigerant under federal law. First up to testify is the Attorney General on Zoom.
Morning, Chair, members of the committee.
Hi.
Hi. The department has identified two concerns with placing this provision in Chapter 342B. The first concern is that it will create a private right of action for private individuals to enforce it. And the second concern is that it will create an affirmative obligation for DOH personnel to enforce the provision. So we suggest an amendment to take it out of Chapter 342B. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next up, Department of Health with comments in person.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Marianne Rossio from the Department of Health. Department stands on its written testimony offering comments, and we're here if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then AHRI, Mike Narazi on Zoom.
Yes, good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of the House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. My name is Mike Narazi. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for AHRI, which is the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today and convey our strong support for House Bill 345, sponsored by Representative Lowen, which will provide the HVAC/R industry with the certainty needed to comply with forthcoming federal regulations that are going to be phasing down the use of hydrofluorocarbons, otherwise known as HFCs. AHRI represents more than 330 manufacturers of air conditioning, heating, commercial refrigeration, and water heating equipment. Our member companies, some of which operate factories or are headquartered here in Hawaii, produce more than 90% of the residential and commercial air conditioning, heating, and commercial refrigeration equipment made in all of North America. We are also pleased to share with you that the HVAC/R industry supports more than 2,000 jobs in Hawaii, with more than 883,000 jobs nationwide. As members of the committee may be aware, the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act of 2020, otherwise known as the AIM Act, is phasing down the production and import of a class of chemicals known as hydrofluorocarbons, which are primarily used as refrigerants in air conditioners and refrigerators, and in a range of other applications such as foams, solvents, and fire suppressants. The US EPA is in the process of implementing the AIM Act in a way that will guide an orderly, market, consumer, and environmentally friendly transition to a wide range of substitute refrigerants. Importantly, substitutes exist and are commercially available for all major uses of HFCs. US manufacturers are already planning transitions to substitutes, which is creating jobs, stimulating new investment, and positioning the United States to sustain its technology leadership within the HVAC/R industry across the world. The challenge is that the state building codes do not allow the use of certain substitute refrigerants. AHRI and its member companies are working diligently to amend state building codes to allow these substitute refrigerants. To date, more than 20 states have adopted changes to their state building codes, substantively similar to House Bill 345. Most other states are in the process of doing so. By the end of the year, if not sooner, AHRI is expecting all states needing to make changes to the state building code will have done so. The most important issue right now is time. New regulations proposed by the EPA will significantly restrict the upstream supply of HFCs beginning in 2024, and separately prohibit the use of certain HFCs in most air conditioning and refrigeration product categories beginning in 2025. As manufacturers start to transition product lines to HFC substitutes, they need to know that they can sell products with these substitutes in US markets, including the state of Hawaii. The most significant barrier these manufacturers face to doing so is in the state's building code. What HB 345 does is amend the state building code this year to allow any HFC substitute that has already been approved by the EPA to be used in air conditioning refrigeration equipment. If this change is not made this year, manufacturers will face significant risk of being unable to sell their new air conditioning and refrigeration equipment into the state once new EPA regulations take effect. HB 345 does not make any other change to state law. It simply removes a barrier to ensure Hawaii consumers and businesses enjoy uninterrupted access to air conditioning and refrigeration equipment with the latest, most advanced, and most climate-friendly technologies available. The climate benefits of the AIM Act implementation are considerable. Because many HFCs are thousands of times more powerful than carbon dioxide.
We do have your written testimony, and we have reviewed it. Do you want to just summarize in your words? And then we'll.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think what I just mentioned pretty much it's fixing, it's a timing issue. It's timing between when Hawaii updates their building code cycle, traditionally usually it's like 3 years, and when this AIM Act takes effect at the federal level. So we're basically, by enacting this legislation, we're implementing a bridge to get Hawaii to the point where they can update their building codes that include all of these new substitute refrigerants, which are the 2024 model ICC codes. So this, again, is a stopgap measure to ensure our manufacturers can continue to sell equipment in Hawaii once this transition begins next year.
Great,
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, and then we have Caroline Azaleski in opposition and Ted Bolin.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. Ted Bolin on behalf of the Climate Protectors Hawaii. Let me state first, hydrofluorocarbon refrigerants are very bad greenhouse gases, up to 1,000 times as powerful as CO2. So it's very important that we not have these leak or get into the atmosphere at all. And I appreciate the last speaker's concerns. We want to have alternative refrigerants. I feel the bill is perhaps overbroad in saying that no law, ordinance, or code, including the state building code, shall prohibit or limit the deemed acceptable use of a refrigerant, and perhaps there's other language that isn't quite so overbroad. So that's the nature of my opposition, is really to the language, not to the intent. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Available for questions.
Thank you. That's everyone we have signed up to testify in advance. Is there anyone else here to testify on this measure? If not, members, any questions? I have a quick question, I guess, for Mike Nerosi on Zoom. I think we're all on the same page in terms of what we want to see in the future. It just seems like I don't know of any effort to prohibit the use of the alternative refrigerants in the state building code. So it seems potentially a little reactive to make some assumption that that's going to happen. There would also be further opportunity during the building code adoption process to weigh in. So I guess what is driving this concern? Has there been a state that's taken action to prohibit the use of the hydrofluorocarbon alternatives?
A great question. Thank you so much. I think there just might be a little bit of confusion. So in the state building code, there has to be there's a list of acceptable refrigerants that could be used in equipment in the state of Hawaii. That refers to what's called the EPA SNAP list, which contains all these approved refrigerants. The existing building codes do not reference the new refrigerants. So it's prohibitive simply because these refrigerants aren't listed in Hawaii's building codes. So by passing this legislation, as we start to phase down the nation's supply of HFC refrigerants by 40%, the EPA will cut them by 40% starting in July of next year. In order to continue selling equipment in Hawaii, we need to have all of these refrigerants listed in the building code, which is why, to the gentleman's concern about the legislation being overly broad, the reason it's broad is because there are dozens of new refrigerants and more coming onto the market every day. And again, getting EPA approval and EPA approved safety standards. And so the reason it's broad is so that, again, Hawaii has full access to all HVAC refrigeration equipment as this transition begins.
And then I would just also note we did insert this same language under HRS 107 in House Bill 197, which is I think being heard in the CPC committee later today. And then that bill also has language that says, in addition to what we had inserted, which you were asking for, which is the same language in this bill, It also says, language under Chapter 107 relating to the state building code, when adopting, amending, or updating codes and standards identified in Section 107-25, the council shall establish codes and standards that are consistent with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with hydrofluorocarbons. I mean, that seems like kind of the middle ground of addressing the issue with less broad language. Regardless, we actually have both in the current version of House Bill 197. But what do you think of that language?
Unfortunately, certainly we're appreciative of adding our suggested language into that legislation. And again, I think it's because there is a specific list of refrigerants that are acceptable, and it's changing all the time. And so we need to specifically reference in the legislation that list, which is maintained by the U.S. EPA. And again, it's broad, by design, so that way we're not having to come back to the Hawaii's legislature and asking them to continue to add new acceptable refrigerants every time the EPA approves one. Again, the building code cycle is lagging, so there will be a period of time if this legislation isn't adopted where the existing HFC equipment is not going to be able to be sold, maybe in low supply, and at that point, obviously that negatively impacts consumers in Hawaii.
So what if there was a provision that sort of automatically repealed that line after the new lists were adopted? Just so that, because it's not necessarily great policy making to kind of mandate this sort of thing in HRS.
Yeah, I completely understand. So I'm actually from Pennsylvania, Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I was the point person for our legislation that was passed here and signed by Governor Wolf late in 2022. We did work with the building code officials in Pennsylvania to add in a sunset date that effectively says when the 2024 model ICC codes are adopted, which include all these refrigerants and safety standards, that essentially it sunsets the legislation, because at that point it would be moot. So that's one potential avenue we've used in other states. I mean, I will just note, we've done this so far in 20 states, and it's actually a very bipartisan list of states. But I think to Hawaii's probably better, relevant in terms of relevancy, California, Washington, Oregon, those are 3 states that already enacted it last session, along with the bulk of the New England states, and with the minus New Hampshire, where actually our legislation moved yesterday out of committee. So, the environmental benefit of this legislation is immense. It's going to cut our emissions from greenhouse gas emissions from these refrigerants by 75% over the next 15 years. Again, we just want Hawaii consumers to have access to all of the safe, approved EPA refrigerants as they come onto the market and as this transition begins.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for answering our questions. Any other questions, members? All right. Thanks again. If not, we'll move on to the next bill on the agenda, House Bill 1292, relating to waste to energy, requiring the State Energy Office to enter into public-private partnerships to develop waste to energy generating facility on land under jurisdiction of DLNR. First up to testify is DLNR. In person or on Zoom with comments?
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Russell Tsuji for DLNR. We'll stand on our written comments, available for questions if you have any at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Department of Public Safety with comments. Hawaii State Energy Office with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Representative Cameron Black. On behalf of the Hawaii State Energy Office, we stand on our written comments. Here to answer questions. Thank you.
And then City and County of Honolulu, Department of Environmental Services, Roger Babcock with comments. And concerns, Alan Burdick, Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in opposition. Iron Workers Stabilization Fund in support. Come forward.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. My name is Clyde Hayashi. I'm testifying on behalf of the Ironworkers Stabilization Fund and Managing Director T. George Paris. We sent out a written testimony and I'd like to just add a few comments. Right now, solid waste is handled by the 4 counties. This bill will lead to the state building a waste-to-energy plant. And hopefully, it could help to increase the use of waste energy across the state. More use of the technology will mean a decreased reliance on landfills. Right now, in Honolulu, the majority of municipal solid waste is processed through H-Power. And all solid waste not recycled or processed via waste-to-energy will likely end up in a landfill. And for the ironworkers, we're especially concerned about the effect that PVT, a private construction and demolition landfill in Nanakuli, has had on the 2 surrounding census tracts where many of our members live. The CDC has determined that those 2 census tracts have a life expectancy of 10 years less than our statewide average. And the other benefit will be, it will add to the source of firm renewable energy for the island of Oahu. Thank you.
Thank you. Kauai Climate Action Coalition in opposition. Two people from the Kauai Climate Action Coalition. And then we have Sanhai in opposition on behalf of H-Power. Zero Waste Hawaii Island in opposition. Recycle Hawaii in opposition. Climate Protectors Hawaii, Ted Bolin.
Thank you again, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. Ted Bolin for the Climate Protectors Hawaii. We are in strong opposition to this bill. First of all, I think there's a euphemism involved here that we should get away from. I don't think we should call it waste energy. I think it would be more accurate to call it trash to ash with toxic air pollution and severe greenhouse gas effects. An incinerator is likely to be very controversial, very expensive, and there may not be any suitable land, as DLNR has indicated in another hearing. Also, I don't think you should mandate now what the agency should do in the future based on complete information. So for all of these reasons, I think this bill is a very poor idea and ought to be held. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Energy and Climate Action Committee, Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party in opposition. 350 in opposition. Hawaiian Electric on Zoom.
Hi, good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee, Greg Shimokawa from Hawaiian Electric. I'm just offering some comments in addition to our written testimony. We would like to note from our perspective, Hawaiian Electric already purchases power from H-Power at 69 megawatts, and as noted, there has been a shortage of trash for H-Power to meet their contractual obligations to burn and produce power. So that's one point. And then the second point I want to make is that we do have a process for bringing new projects, including for renewable projects, onto our system to contract with Hawaiian Electric to produce power for our grid. We actually have an open request for proposals for projects on Oahu. Call that our Stage 3 RFP is open for bids currently through April. So we believe that that's a more appropriate venue for a new project such as this to be evaluated and potentially contracted. I'm here to answer questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hawaii Stevedores with comments. Our Revolution Hawaii in opposition on Zoom.
Good morning. Thank you so much for hearing this. We stand in incredibly strong opposition to this proposal. Waste to energy is one of the most expensive and least effective ways of creating energy. It seems like a good idea. Let's get rid of the landfill and we'll just burn everything. You heard from other folks that, oh, well, these landfills are leaking toxic materials. Well, burning them is even a worse idea because you're now putting it in the atmosphere and we're breathing it. It's going into our water supply, and it's one of the most toxic ways of putting this kind of stuff into our atmosphere. The these waste facilities, when they put these particulates in the atmosphere, they put dioxins, furans, and up to 14 times more mercury, twice as much lead, and 4 times as much cadmium per energy unit than a coal plant. These are ineffective ways to provide sustainable energy. Better we go for a zero waste kind of way of getting rid of our landfills. There are plenty of ways to do that. We don't need to do this really bad technology that's ineffective and is a false solution. One of the things that you're hearing from the industry is that, oh, well, it's going to give us jobs. Well, green jobs will give 10 times as more jobs. And they need to start investigating green jobs and start focusing on all these things that they've done in the past. The world is changing, and it's time for them to look for new jobs. And they're out there. We need those green jobs. So thank you very much. Please vote against this. It's a very bad idea. It's very dangerous, very ineffective, very polluting, and not a good idea for our folks here in Hawaii. Oh, plus, as he said earlier, that they can't even keep up with the trash right now. It has to have very high volume, and we don't have that kind of capacity here in Hawaii. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Blue Planet Foundation in opposition. Energy Justice Network in opposition on Zoom. Mike Ewell, not present. And then Kokua Na'aina in opposition. Life of the Land.
Aloha, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of the committee. Life of Land opposes the bill, but we're going to focus on something that has not really been discussed so far. Right now, to our knowledge, the State Energy Office has never engaged in a private-public partnership, so this would be a new role for them. They have been actively engaging the community, the business sector, and other sectors in reaching out. This would change them from being an open agency to dealing with different entities within the public to one on a mission to get one thing passed. In addition, the State Energy Office is charged with moving us towards our state energy goals, but this would be saying that the State Energy Office should prioritize waste to energy over all other forms of energy, and that is crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. Sierra Club of Hawaii in opposition. And then we have quite a bit of testimony from individuals. 47 people submitted testimony in support and 26 in opposition. I don't think anyone signed up to be here in person, but is there anyone else here to testify on this measure that I missed? Anyone on Zoom? Okay, members, questions? All right, I have some questions. State Energy Office, I'll start with you. I think to Life of the Land's point, not only would this sort of potentially be conflicting with the other goals the State Energy Office is tasked with achieving, it would also mean you would be supporting a project prior to it having an approved contract to sell the energy it's making. And that regulatory process, you know, is supposed to be led by considering affordability and resilience and reliability and greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. So, I mean, hypothetically, if something like this were to move forward, I mean, how would you be able to ensure that the public interest was being considered, and how would there be would this potentially, maybe this is a question for someone else, but potentially be kind of make you be run afoul of other laws relating to like ethics and so on, in terms of representing a project before the commission, not on behalf of the people of the state of Hawaii?
Yeah, I think those are legitimate concerns. The way I read this bill, we would enter into this public-private partnership early in the process, presumably, because that's, I think, typically how projects are developed. The partnerships are formed semi-early in the process before they've received PUC approval. And our testimony specifically acknowledges our limited expertise and experience in public-private partnerships as a means to carry out our statutory duties, which have also been mentioned, which are a lot of them. And being in this neutral position has allowed us to facilitate between government and the private sector. Building any type of capacity like that within our agency would require additional resources and staffing.
Right, but to my question, I mean, how would the Energy Office be able to ensure that there was some kind of firewall between your efforts and the Public Utilities Commission approval process? Because, you know, if there wasn't, you could end up with a project that was not balancing out in the interest of the ratepayer, and have people end up paying more when there's better alternatives. So, I mean, I feel like having the Energy Office be tasked with pushing a specific project, which, as you said, is never done before, how would you ensure that the PUC remains impartial when you're both kind of working for the same boss?
Yeah, I think that's a very legitimate point. It would be very hard to stay neutral. I mean, obviously, we couldn't stay neutral in this particular project, but even for other projects, it could potentially compromise our neutrality in other dockets. I can't say for sure without really digging into it, but I think that's a legitimate concern, especially if this project were to proceed, the waste-to-energy project.
Thanks. I guess, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess for life of the land, similar question. I mean, do you think that this would be a problem with, like, on a ethics law level, or kind of a other, that conflict of functions, or would it open the state up to more liability?
I think you hit it on the button when you pointed out that the State Energy Office works very closely with the PUC, and that would be compromised by this bill. The State Energy Office adopts a very neutral, very supportive position on state energy policy, and they would have to change their role with the PUC. Ethically, I'm not sure. It may run afoul, but that's not my expertise.
Do you think it's appropriate for the legislature to pick to direct a, implementation of a specific project that would then sell energy to ratepayers without it going through the regulatory process, prior to it going through the regulatory process?
No, I don't think it would be appropriate, and I think if H-Power were to have started this year as opposed to when it did before the environmental movement really took off on energy, you would have had a very, very different picture.
And then I guess, we use the term renewable energy quite a lot, and we do have a list of what we consider renewable energy, and that provides a lot of benefits in terms of being more local and, various benefits, but at the same time, it is kind of agnostic on greenhouse gas emissions, and we do also have a state decarbonization goal. So those are considerations that also come into play when projects go before the PUC.
I believe H-Power is one of two of the highest greenhouse gas emissions per megawatt hour produced in the state.
All right, thanks. Did Department of Health submit on this? Can I call up Department of Health? All right, no. Mike, are you not?
This is totally different.
Okay, I guess maybe Ted, I'll try asking you and see if you know some of the answers as a former Department of Health. I guess just so people are aware, and as you said, trash to ash. I mean, do you know how many tons of ash per day get buried in the landfill on Oahu from H-Power?
I could get that information for you. I don't remember and don't want to testify to it because my memory's not good enough on it, but it's a lot. And Mike Ewell, who was one of the people to testify, it wasn't available, would know that and could give you good information on it. But it's a lot of ash, and it's a lot of toxic stuff in the ash. So you're not really getting rid of the problem of environmental problem that you have when you put stuff into the landfill. Now you're putting toxic ash into the landfill, and it's much smaller in volume, but it does have a lot of pollutants too, and you're throwing stuff up in the air that is toxic. So that's part of my opposition. Thank you.
Do you know that answer to that, Mike?
I can get that.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is it 100, 200, 300?
I wouldn't
400 tons. I think I heard somewhere more than 400 tons a day.
Information and the landfill information. So what comes from the HPAR and goes to what it all involved. So we can get that. It might take a little bit because everything gets reported as a stone. But
Okay.
we'll pull that for you and get that to you as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, members or board?
Chair, I have the same question, maybe expressed differently. What percent goes in the ground, what percent is burned? Does anyone know what that is? What the waste to energy does in terms of the percentage of waste that actually we're burning versus we're burying? Mr. Curtis, do you know? You want to take a guess at it?
I would answer your question this way by saying it's not the poundage or the tonnage, but it's the toxicity of what
But I'm
goes
looking
in
for the
the...
percentage. I want to see what's the weight now for burying versus burning. Contrast the two, compare and contrast. We burn this much, we bury this much. Does it?
I think that's a false question because it's not...
Okay, I'm a metrics guy. Well, how many states are doing this and what do they do versus the burying and versus the burning? In other words, is this the first in the universe? No way. Does anyone know where this is working and has been done?
No.
Mr. McDonald's.
No. We're gonna limit questions to people
We're-
who testified.
What do you mean we're going to limit? This is a
To
hearing.
people who testified on the bill,
Because I want to know if this has been done in any other state. You're saying that's out of order?
Do you want to, no, you want to ask Energy Office? Do you want to ask Life of the Land? Do you
No,
want to ask
the
iron
gentleman from
workers?
McDonald's.
He did not submit testimony on this
Oh, he
bill.
didn't, oh, sorry, you're disqualified, sir. Anyone who submitted testifying knows what's going on in the rest of the country? Ted, you're the guy.
I'll take a shot at it, although I can't be specific. I think it's not the first of incinerators, it may be the last. This is a dying industry. They're having terrible trouble siting them anywhere. The environmental effects are known now, and people are resisting. So they generally last like 20 or 30 years. A lot of them are shutting down. I don't know if there's been any new ones. It's really a dying industry, I think.
Nobody told Frank Fossey when he put that in Kapolei, did he? Okay.
Can't comment on that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Ted.
Chair.
More questions? Any other questions? All right, and we will move on. Next bill on the agenda, House Bill 835 relating to gas appliances. This prohibits installation of gas appliances in new construction in the state beginning January 1st, 2025. We did have a lot of testimony submitted. I think not many people signed up to testify in person. And I don't normally limit how much time we have on testimony, and I'm not going to start off that way, but just we ask that everyone summarize and keep it brief so we can keep moving forward. First up, we do have AAC in opposition. Librado Cobian. Sorry, I don't have the acronym for that. Oh, it's not included in testimony. Okay. Hawaii Restaurant Association, Victor Lim.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Corcoran, and members of the committee. My name is Victor Lim, and I represent the Hawaii Restaurant Association, which made up of about 4,017 eating and drinking places here in the state. We strongly oppose this bill for a couple of reasons. Basically, in the restaurant industry, gas cooking is overwhelmingly about 80% choice of all the chefs in terms of cooking. And you know, if you look at where the forcing people to just use the electric, we are already paying 44 cents per kilowatt here in Honolulu, and on the neighbor islands it's even closer to 60 cents per kilowatt. And it's very, very expensive. Gas range are normally 10 to 30% less expensive to maintain and to run. And really, by passing a bill like this, you are choosing which industry is going to survive and which industry is not going to survive. And yesterday, as I was flying back, I have a phone call from somebody that said that, hey, how is going to Chinese restaurant without gas cooking? You know, and the same thing goes for a Filipino restaurant that's going to do that. So I think 2025 is just around the corner, and it's too short a timeline for us to be implementing something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Kauai Climate Action Coalition in support, Highway in opposition, We Are One Inc. in support, Chamber of Commerce Hawaii.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Trevor Abruzzo with the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii. We do not support this bill, and the reason why is we're worried about the cost of electricity. You know, Hawaii already has the highest cost of electricity in the country, and with the recent closure of a few energy projects and the enactment of this bill, it would be exponential for businesses and for residents. Currently, the residential market sits at 35% use gas stoves in their homes. The other reason we're worried about is the jobs. You know, we already have issue here in the economy with jobs, and we would lose a substantial amount of jobs. Hawaii Gas employs over 350 people in the state, and that does not include the maintenance workers and the private contractors that do work on fixing these stoves. So we stand opposed to this measure. We ask you hold the bill, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Climate Protectors Hawaii, Ted Bolin in support.
Thank you again, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of the committee. Ted Bolin for the Climate Protectors Hawaii, in strong support of this bill. First, the greenhouse gas effect of burning gas is significant, and this would reduce that. So that's the first reason the climate protectors are involved. But also, there's health effects. Recent studies show that 12.7% of childhood asthma cases are caused by gas stoves or by the burning of gas in buildings, in homes. So there is a significant health concern here that ought to be addressed. For those who are chefs or cooks who like instant heat that gas provides, and some electric stoves don't provide, there are induction stoves now that are quick and heat up very quickly. And we want to avoid the hazardous air pollutants that are coming from the burning of gas. What this bill doesn't do is outlaw existing stoves in any way, and it doesn't prevent sale, it just prevents the installation of gas facilities, which we want to avoid in the future in order to reduce our climate impact. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we have FCH Enterprises in opposition, American Gas Association with comments, HECA Decarbonization of Buildings Task Force in support, Blue Planet Foundation in support, AHAM, which is Appliance of Home Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, I believe, on Zoom.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Lowe, members of the committee. My name is John Payne, Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, and we're in opposition to House Bill 835, which covers everything from your refrigerator, clothes wash, and cooking top. Our products include all cooking products must meet with current safety standards and building code requirements. Gas cooking is a safe and affordable cooking method currently used in 40% of all U.S. households. Many people value it for its speed and control. The impact on indoor air quality from emissions from cooking products has been considered by standards regulatory bodies for decades. Either this U.S. EPA or the CPSC has identified any significant health issues associated with operation of natural gas cooking appliances. Recent study by the California Ventilation System Requirements completed by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory for the California Energy Commission found that current ventilation requirements were adequate to protect consumer health and safety. To conclude, AHAM is created to preserving an environment that allows for consumer choice, innovation, cooking, bans on gas appliances, restrict consumer choice, removing affordable choices for consumers. With that, we are opposed to House Bill 835. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hawaii Gas in opposition.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Julie Yunker with Hawaii Gas. Hawaii Gas strongly opposes this bill. Hawaii has the lowest natural gas consumption and the highest electricity rates in the nation. And currently, electric rates are twice as much as gas rates in Hawaii. This bill will place another cost burden on local families and businesses who are already struggling with increased inflation and the high cost of living. Our customers depend on gas for everyday home use, and especially during weather events such as hurricanes, floods, and lava flows. Eliminating reliable non-electric energy options will decrease energy resiliency and increase the negative effects of power outages. This bill assumes that installing electric appliances over gas appliances would substantially reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but the fact that in 2021, the consolidated RPS was 38.4% renewables. Oil generates the rest of the electricity across the islands. Hawaii Gas has already installed renewable natural gas and hydrogen in its pipeline and is in an integrated resource planning docket, which will design a pathway for Hawaii Gas to further decarbonize its fuel sources in line with the state's energy goals. Mandating one fuel source and eliminating another will limit decarbonization innovation. Perhaps it would be wiser to initiate a study to fully identify and understand what this impact would be. Such a study should be integrated with the PUC's ongoing integrated resource planning docket. We urge the committee to defer this measure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thanks. And then we have Oceanit Laboratories, Inc. in opposition. 350 Hawaii in support. The Hawaii Federation of Republican Women on Zoom.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of the committee. The Federation stands in strong opposition of HB 835. And I'm going to stand on my submitted testimony, but I would like to highlight a few points that impact our communities. So first of all, as spoken before, gas burns clean. Gas is efficient. And let's talk about our rural communities right now, especially those in your district, Chair. So many rural communities live off the grid and they rely on gas for their cooking needs and for other needs, for their washers and dryers and whatnot. And so we need to take those communities into consideration. It places a heavy burden on many families that live on gas. And as stated before, the price of electricity continues to accelerate. And lastly, and most importantly, this is pure government overreach. People have a right to make choices for themselves. I believe everyone takes the environment into consideration. I'm a lifelong Hawaii resident, and this is really government overreach. I stand on my written testimony and in strong opposition of HB 835. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I yield.
Thank you. And then PAR Hawaii with comments. Our Revolution Hawaii on Zoom.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing this bill, and we are in strong support. This is for new construction. So all the folks who she was worried about, it's not going to affect them. This is new construction. We are in a new era. We are in an era of climate change. And the legislature has already determined we are already in a climate emergency. And so the legislature now has to start legislating like we're in a climate emergency. Gas is not clean, reliable, and efficient. In fact, we know that it has high toxic qualities that are actually in our homes now. And more studies are showing that. Many states now are moving away from gas. California, Colorado, New York, and Washington adopted policies that restrict the use of gas appliances in buildings in some ways, including banning gas hookups to newly constructed buildings. We're talking newly constructed buildings. We're not taking away anybody's gas to be on the beach to make their meal. So let's focus on the reality of what we're talking about here, new construction. And anyway, so gas is more polluting than coal, it's more destructive than coal in our atmosphere. And if we are going to prevent total breakdown of our climate, we have to get off our fossil fuels. So that's my testimony. Thank you so much for hearing it, and have a very good day.
Thank you. And then we have Stanford Car Development in opposition, Hilo Propane in opposition, Castle and Cook Hawaii in opposition, BIA Hawaii in opposition, Pacific Propane Gas Association in opposition, Hawaii Farm Bureau in opposition, and Kapolei Chamber of Commerce in opposition. We have a number of individual testimonies. A few people signed up, so I'll just read those names, but overall we have 14 testimonies in support and 147 in opposition and 2 with comments. And then, let's see, we had Matt Geyer signed up to testify in person.
Aloha, Chair.
Matt Geyer with Hawaii Environmental Change Agents, testifying as an individual. And I just wanted to highlight there's already been a study done, I don't know if you saw earlier this year, that shows that 12.7% of childhood asthma cases are a direct result of fossil fuel, gas, being burned in homes to cook our food. So there doesn't need to be any more studies. This is not clean burning. This is only talking about new construction. This isn't talking about taking people's gas stoves from their businesses or from their homes. Only in new construction. Thank you for hearing this bill. Strong support. Aloha.
Thank you. And then we have Kaleo Nakoa on Zoom, not present, in opposition. Adriel Lamb, in person or on Zoom? In opposition. And then Shigemi Okada on Zoom, not present. Christy Sarasso in person? No. All right, is there anyone else here I missed? Please come forward.
Aloha Kakou Chair Lowen, Representative Cochran, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is George Pritchard. I'm president of Suma Farms, a local feedstock supplier for renewable fuel producers. We currently and purposely plant and farm locally a grass crop as a biomass feedstock, organic material that is converted to produce renewable natural gas, occurring by a process called anaerobic digestion, which is a natural occurring process. We are in opposition of H. Bill 835. We feel that it will take away the benefit of these other renewable fuels that we're trying to create here locally and produce locally, and then for our own use and benefit. It awes me that our host culture survived here for 2,000 years without any imports. And yet today, it's totally reversed. We're so dependent on the rest of the world. We're isolated 2,500 miles away from everyone else. We have to rely on just ourselves. These are some of the ways that we can do that, and revitalizing ag at the same time. I want to just share just a few facts to consider. The EPA does not list gas stoves as a significant contributor to indoor quality or health hazards. And again, we live in a crazy time today. For every test that says one thing, there's somebody with a study and test that says something else. So I would advise the committee, I want to remind the committee that the difference between the poor and the wealthy citizens of Hawaii is the poor and less fortunate have little or no choice in decision-making ability for their unmet needs. The more fortunate and wealthy you are, the more choices and decisions you are afforded to meet your needs. So a lot of testimony has been given. That being said, I empower you to keep in mind the important decisions that you will make on behalf of all of those citizens that aren't able to make those decisions, that rely upon you, so that you can be pono with those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to testify that I missed? If not, members' questions, Rep. Ward.
I have a cultural and a scientific question. Mr. Lim, can I start with you? As a connoisseur of Chinese food, you said something that was interesting. You said because of the heat level, the Chinese food, I think with peanut oil, can go up, is it 450 or 500 degrees that you need to?
I'm not sure about the degrees, but if you look at how Chinese cooking with the wok, it's a flame. So many times as you were cooking, you actually tilt the wok so that the flame can come right through the food, so that it has a flesh flavor that it puts through. Same thing with Filipino food, doing lechon, something like that. You need open flame, yeah?
My wife explains to me that is the case. That's why I gave the numbers. Yeah. But she also has an induction stove, but she doesn't have a wok that she uses on the induction stove. Can the induction stove do what you just said with the walk and the
I,
others?
I don't believe so.
That is the issue. Now my scientific question, and it may not be you, it may be Ted or somebody else. For every hour of a stovetop gas stove, how many miles do you drive in a car equivalent? I want to see what we are comparing with apples and oranges. How serious is this thing compared to what's going out there in terms of transportation? Would you know anything about that?
I
probably-
better pass on transportation since it's not my forte.
You're a restaurant guy,
But all I
right?
know is that I'm paying 44 cents a kilowatt for electricity, and I'm the highest in the country, where my counterparts on the mainland pay about 15.
15 cents. And be sure to not go off the grid.
Yeah.
You won't have
No,
any
no.
left. Does anyone know the equivalent? When you drive a mile in your car, sir, Mr. Pritchard, please come back, Mr. Pritchard. I think it's George Pritchard.
Yes, sir. So that calculation will be based on BTUs, which is the value of the energy. So the current cost per BTU, average cost coming to importation to probably Hawaii is about $25 an MMBTU. If you convert that into dollars and cents, it's about 11.26 cents. 11.26 conversion, you're probably about in the high $7 range per gallon on that conversion.
I was thinking of something a little more straightforward, like when I drive from Hawaii to here, about 15 miles, how many meals are being cooked in the process? I want to look at the equivalent of what I drive versus what I pollute with the stove.
So if I just took it into gallons, if the conversion rate for current cost of gas is, let's say, $2 a gallon versus the current cost of gas at $6 a gallon, then that's the difference, right, per mile that you drive. I'll use that as a more closer example, because cooking is going to have different heat values, whereas if I could just convert it to transportation, it's an equivalent.
I'm looking for the pollution equivalent. When you're cooking versus when you're driving, and how much of a percentage are we actually talking about? It probably is something that people haven't conceptualized, but to me, that makes sense to the guy in the street. It makes sense to us when we pass laws. Having said that, I don't do math in public, otherwise that was a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's see, I have a couple quick questions. Let me just say too, my inclination is to defer this bill just based on testimony. But I thought it was important to have the conversation. And Hawaii Gas, I have some questions for you. I guess, whether or not it's listed by the EPA, I think it's well established that gas stoves are a source of indoor air pollution, not the only source,
Right.
but, do contribute. I think I've read statistics, something like it's equivalent, in terms of causes of childhood asthma to living with a smoker, being exposed to
So that's
secondhand
one
smoke.
study. There are other studies that have been done that have not made that correlation. And so I want to say there was a study that was done back in 2013, published by the
Okay, I
Lancet.
didn't ask a question yet.
Sorry.
I appreciate there's other stuff. I've seen that used frequently, so
Okay.
I appreciate there's always other points out there.
Got it.
The question I have, because you mentioned hydrogen, I think hydrogen does take us a lot further in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but it also does, or correct me if I'm wrong, it also does produce NOx emissions, which contribute to indoor air pollution. But do you have like an equivalent between hydrogen or what fuel mix you have that's part hydrogen versus like kind of standard natural gas? And do they have the same amount of indoor air pollution, or is it the same amount of particulate pollution, I guess, whether it's indoor or outdoor?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, just curious.
I could get that information for you. I know in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, but not down to the level of that. We have done our greenhouse gas inventory for the company, and it does kind of take it down to what those levels are in terms of
Okay,
of what
but I
those
think
are.
not greenhouse gas emissions, but just particulate, other
Particulate.
indoor air pollution. 'Cause
Indoor
I
air
think
pollution.
hydrogen doesn't have greenhouse gas emissions, but if it's pure hydrogen, but it still does create NOx.
Okay, I can
So-
look into that for you. But the one thing too is that when you have the proper ventilation for the stove, that can combat a lot of particulates. And there have been a lot of studies that it's not necessarily what you're cooking with, it's just cooking in general can produce indoor air pollution, among other things in your home too as well. And then if you look at Hawaii homes and you look at a lot of Hawaii restaurants, it's indoor, outdoor. So you've got a lot of flow coming in there, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I've looked at this professionally and personally. We're designing a new home. I really want a gas stove. I have a 15-year-old, of course I'm going to be concerned about that, right? So I'm going to look into that. But at this point, you know, the research that I've done, I personally don't believe that putting a gas stove in my home is going to be dangerous for my child. So let's just...
Sure, and then there's different debates over whether building
Right.
electrification is more the way of the future in terms of decarbonization.
Correct, right?
But, and you know, like I said, I'm planning to defer the bill, but
okay.
if I were to move it forward, I'd probably limit it to residential construction and, you know, kind of take the commercial off the table as a point of debate, because I do hear all the concerns from restaurants, especially.
Right.
But I think with the oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I would say with the residents, you know, to the point too, where you're kind of out in the rural committees, and we do hear from a lot of our customers that they depend on gas when the power grid goes down, right? They can heat, they can shower, they can cook, they can do a lot of
Well,
other
then
things.
I guess we could look, a potential, if we were to move forward, a potential amendment would be to just limit gas infrastructure, like pipelines, not necessarily propane tanks and appliances in rural areas. 'Cause
Right, but
that is affect my district and there's other districts that are rural.
But I think if you do that, then you kind of take away of that innovation, the decarbonization innovation piece to that, right? So as we're working with, you know, partners like SEMA Farms and everybody else to really decarbonize our fuel source, you know, why take one option off the table and be solely dependent on the electric grid, right?
Yeah.
So I think as we're both moving to the 2045 goals, we're going through that IRP process. We're looking at all the different scenarios that we can do in terms of meeting the state's goals. So I think, you know, just being able to have that chance, you know, to be able to be part of that clean energy future and that conversation would be important.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please, go ahead.
The gas company, could you remind us, or do you know how many hundreds of years the U.S. has in terms of gas supplies?
How many, I'm sorry?
How many hundreds of years we have of gas supplies, natural gas?
So we actually don't have natural gas in Hawaii.
Well, that you're making your own.
We're making our own. So we're actually taking the byproduct from PAR, it's naphtha, which is the cleanest burning fuel that comes out of PAR process, and we produce synthetic natural gas. And then through that process, hydrogen is produced too. So we have up to 12 to 15% of hydrogen.
So you don't have to import any
No.
gas at all?
It's PAR. Well, we take it from PAR, so it's a byproduct from the refinery.
The last I heard, it was 400 years of natural gas supplies in the mainland. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks. Any further questions, members? All right, if not, we'll move on to the maybe slightly less exciting part of the agenda.
Slowing down.
House Bill 85 is next, relating to single-use plastics. This prohibits lodging establishments from providing personal care products in small plastic containers within sleeping room accommodations, any space within sleeping room accommodations or bathrooms. So basically just transitioning away from the small single-use plastics to things that are sustainably packaged or bulk dispensers, which a lot of hotels are already moving towards. First up, we have DLNR in support and in person.
I was seeing if anybody would show up on Zoom. Michael Kane, Department of Land and Natural Resources. We stand on our testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Department of Health.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, members of the committee. My name is Michael Burke with the Department of Health. We submitted testimony in support and stand on our written testimony, and I'm available for questions if you have. And also, if I may, for HB 1292, it's about 150,000 tons of ash from HPAR to the landfill.
A year.
150,000 tons, yes.
Okay, a year. What is that per day?
I was a political
Okay.
science major.
We'll move,
Sorry.
we'll move on, thanks. Hawaii Tourism Authority with comments. I think their testimony said support, though. It says comments on my testifier list, but just pull this up. Okay. Comments in support of the intent, that's what okay, that's just a roundabout way of saying comments. Okay. Surfrider Foundation, Hawaii Region in support. Surfrider Maui Chapter in support. Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition, Ted Bolin.
Thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. Ted Boland for the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support of this bill. We need to get off of using plastic. This is one place where the plastic is pretty unessential. And it would be, you make a lot of little bottles that end up on your beaches if they are not properly handled and they break down. So let's stop using all the plastic, and this is a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Maui Hotel and Lodging Association in support. Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association in support. And then we have 16 individuals in support and 3 in opposition, noting that one person was only opposing to the defective date of June 30th, 3000, and otherwise supported it. But that's everyone who submitted testimony in advance. Is there anyone else here to testify on this measure? If not, members, any questions? All right, we will move on. House Bill 756 relating to land use. This is establishing a voluntary relocation plan to move residential development away from sea level rise risk areas. First up to testify is University of Hawaii, Darren Lerner.
Aloha, good morning. My name is Dolan Eversole on behalf of Darren Lerner with the University of Hawaii. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We will stand on our written testimony in support, and I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Good morning, Chair and Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Justine Nihipali with the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. We'll stand on our testimony with comments and recommendations. Just purely for consistency with the statutory framework, we support the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hawaii Emergency Management Agency on Zoom.
Hi, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Jill Matsumoto, and I'm representing Administrator James Barrows. We stand by our written testimony offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Don Chang, DLNR, someone from DLNR in support.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, committee members. Michael Kane, Department of Land and Natural Resources. We've submitted testimony in strong support of this measure. I would note that based upon testimony from HIEMA, the Emergency Management Agency, when the bill was first heard, we've proposed recommended languages that take their concerns into account. We've also had a chance to review testimony from OPSD and from the city and county. We support OPSD's recommendations. We think they're consistent with the intent of the bill. I haven't had time to find exact language to work the city and county's suggestions into the bill, but we do think it can be covered as we develop plans for studying retreat. And I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. City and County of Honolulu, Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resilience in support. Surfrider Foundation in support. On Zoom, not present. Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition.
Thank you again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Boland for the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition in support. The ocean is rising. The sea level is going up. We know that, and it's going to happen whether we like it or not. So we need to start planning. We need to pull back from the shoreline, and trying to just harden the shoreline is only going to destroy the shoreline. So we need to do it sensibly. We need to plan, and this bill is a good way to start the work. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Starr and O'Toole, Marcus, and Fisher Law Corporation with comments.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today on House Bill 756. My name is Eric Robinson. My colleague Dwayne Fisher and I submitted testimony on the bill, which I won't restate here, but I would like to reiterate a couple of key points. And the first point is that sea level rise presents a long-term challenge that we all must adopt to. Everyone from the government to the public to the private sector and even the beaches are going to be impacted. There's no silver bullet for adaptation strategies, and we need to look at multiple tools for addressing sea level rise. Which tools are necessary and appropriate will depend on a variety of factors like location, physical conditions, time, and even confirmation of modeling of things like sea level rise. Some tools like retreat are not low regrets options and are not easily reversed, which underscore the importance of employing the right tools at the right time. There's a lot more in the toolbox than retreat and shoreline hardening. So my second point is that we need to ensure that multiple tools are available and we're ready to use them. The proposed revisions to the HD1 that are offered in our written testimony seek to acknowledge this reality and ensure that we're laying the groundwork for multiple tools and not just retreat being available and being able to use the right tools at the right time. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to take any questions the committee has.
Thank you. Coastal Planners LLC in support, and then 4 individuals in opposition and 1 in support. That's all the written testimony submitted in advance. Is there anyone else here to testify on this measure, in person or on Zoom? Members, any questions? Rep. Cochran.
Sure. Thank you, and for the previous gentleman, I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying there's more tools in the toolkit than just manage retreat. I completely support moving this forward, but I know when it went through floor session, I voted WR, and it was in reference to the funding, and we thought that maybe, all these expensive homes on the shoreline would get first dibs at this pot of money, and what about, others who are less fortunate to be able to afford these kind of things. But are you aware of places here, like no retreat and hardening, but restoration type, examples of preserving in place, restoring, keeping the shoreline intact versus just pack up and move the infrastructure out of there?
So one example that comes to mind, I believe, is in Sugar Cove, where they've restored the beach there. Obviously, still ongoing erosion issues, and I know Mr. Kane from OCCL, and I'm sure Ms. Nihipali have plenty more examples. That is one that comes to mind.
Oh, okay, perfect. And that's what was in my mind. I had gone there. So that's a prime example with 3 different added, options, solutions combined together created this success. And they're doing very well. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yeah, that was all. Just to add more to the toolbox.
Sure, quick question. I appreciate your point of view. I don't think that anything in this proposal claims that this is the only solution.
Correct, and I think that's a well-made point there, Chair. So our perspective is we're focusing our efforts on developing retreat as a solution. So by not focusing on developing others, we're not necessarily going to be able and ready to implement those when the time comes. So we're just asking that we kind of widen the aperture and we start looking at these, if we're putting funding towards this, why not look at some protection measures like beach nourishment or restoration, or what else we can do to adapt structures to accommodate sea level rise.
Can I also ask, just for disclosure purposes, who's your client that this impacts?
We have a number of shoreline resorts that we represent, as well as my firm represents the Shoreline Preservation Coalition, which is a collective of private homeowners.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I guess maybe Justine from OPSD. Just curious, based on the testimony about including other options, which I know were included in your report.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's necessary to add into this program, or that by omission are we ruling them out, or what's your take on that?
I don't think by omission we're ruling them out necessarily. I think managed retreat needs a little bit more studying. A lot of the adaptation options that are available are site specific. So it's maybe not looking at like statewide, are, revetments better than seawalls, better than renourishment. It just depends on the geography and what's happening in the environmental conditions and the development behind it. Our office has a beta information resource right now that we're polishing. That's going to be an informational piece that provides a wide variety, more than 3 options for the types of adaptations that are available. So I think managed retreat is just one of the ones that's just the hugest quandary, really, and it's going to have applicability, but only in specific cases, as one of the biggest one of the parts of the toolbox.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
Would you agree, like, while we still have to figure out how this managed retreat might work, and this is kind of a first step towards doing it, the other options of adaptation that might include shoreline hardening or other options actually already have processes and have already been exercised in some cases. So it's not been neglected. Although it should be part of the overall planning strategy.
Yeah, I think they should be part of it. I think how specific adaptation measures in that place need to be studied. The broader understanding of the impacts or the value of the different adaptation strategies, I think, is fairly understood at this point in time. But as mentioned in our testimony, we received competitive funding for an analysis of policy and regulation and trying to understand how implementing managed retreat would impact the state, for the state's understanding of moving forward in certain cases or not. So that's part of how we've been working to address that.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And then DLNR, are you I don't think we've met yet, but are you the new person at OCCL? or?
Correct. I'm the new administrator at Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands, the new Sam Lemo, if that makes it easier.
Yes, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to
We'll
meet
have
you.
to set up a meeting. I guess, what's your take on this question of whether should we keep this bill as I think I still would have to talk to the prior chair before making those changes, but I'm just curious what your take is on whether this bill, which specifically deals with managed retreat as an adaptation option.
We would prefer that this bill maintains its focus on managed retreat. I would note that our office is actively engaged in other adaptation strategies. We've funded and ran projects in Waikiki to do beach nourishment. We finished the studies for beach nourishment at Ka'anapali and Maui. We have finished the studies for establishing potentially tea groins in parts of Waikiki. And these are groins that mimic a natural cove. They still need to go through the permitting process, although we have secured funding from the legislature in prior sessions. So while I concur that we need to look at a range of options, I would let the committee know that we are actively pursuing other options. The big tool we're missing is managed retreat. We go to community hearings, everybody yells retreat, it's just a word, we don't know how to do it yet. So it's the tool we're missing. We know how to use the other tools, and I feel we know when and where they're appropriate, although others may disagree.
And then there was concerns raised in prior discussion of this bill and also by my vice chair, just about whether funds appropriated, if this program was set up and funded, and especially there's bills moving that would create like the Climate Impact Fund or this Sea Level Rise Relocation Fund that would actually give the department discretion over how to spend those in some way. There's just concerns about the idea of making sure that these are targeted towards things in the public interest or lower and moderate income, local residents, and maybe not necessarily to bail out vacation rental owners that live on the mainland or something like that. Do you think that this bill needs guardrails to establish that? I don't think we'll make those changes right now, but just something to think about.
We share the same concerns. I would note that when we met with various environmental groups to start developing this idea last summer, we had talked about doing a pilot project on the North Shore of Oahu and asking for a general appropriation. We've since backed away from that because that would be, again, we're focusing on the same wealthy landowners. And rather than a general appropriation, we're asking for an appropriation out of the Climate Impact Fund, which is overseen by the Climate Commission. So we think there'll be broad oversight on how the projects move forward. So I share the concerns. I hope we've built safeguards into the system.
Okay. Okay, and then if, for those homeowners, you know, if we did establish a program that was more geared towards, you know, some kind of income-based or public interest requirement, I mean, those homeowners would presumably still have insurance coverage that, if there was an incident, would help cover some of the costs incurred. Presumably.
I would want to defer to, I don't know if there's any realtors here on the insurance question. It's not my field. I have heard stories that it's difficult for coastal homeowners now to get insurance, but that's hearsay, so.
Got it, okay. Great, thank you so much. Other questions, members? Go ahead.
And aloha, Mr. Kane. But you're not new.
I've been around, yeah.
Hi. So you did mention that this is the one topic that you folks want more studies and you know, planning around, which I agree.
Correct.
But because you have other solutions that you've already are aware of and have been focusing on. So I know beach nourishment, tea gardens, of course, in the Kahana area of Maui. I'm West Maui,
Right.
you know, prior council member and now House District 14. Are you folks looking into enhanced reefs and that type of, you know, engineering with nature type concepts? You know, just seeing how, because our own UH has new products or technology now for reef enhancements and things that really work well with Mother Nature.
I know that there are people shopping around some proprietary technology, but we have not received any proposals to implement them. And our office is primarily regulatory. It's rare that we take on these big projects like beach nourishment. So even Kahana is, that project will come to us for review and recommendation, but it's not our project. So.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Well, thank you.
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? All right, then we will move on to HB 268 relating to disposable wipes. This would prohibit the sale of flushable wipes due to the impact they have on our wastewater systems. First up is Department of Health with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I'm Darryl Lum from the Department of Health Clean Water Branch. The department stands on our written testimony with comments and offered amendments. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I will be available to answer any questions.
Thank you. And then retail merchants of Hawaii on Zoom, not present. Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Boland for Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition. The idea that there are flushable wipes is a misnomer at best. Anybody who has seen what happens at the wastewater treatment plants where employees have to clean out disgusting wipes that have turned into grease balls covered with sewage and fat, clogging the system that needs to be removed. This is a serious problem for the wastewater treatment system, and we should not be flushing anything down the toilet like flushable wipes. So I support this bill strongly and urge the committee to move it forward. Thank you. Available for questions.
Thanks. And then the Association of Non-Woven Fabrics Industry on Zoom. Wes Fisher.
Hi, good morning, Chair Lowen and committee members. My name is Wes Fisher. I am the Director of Government Affairs for INDA, the Association of the Non-Woven Fabrics Industry. We're a national trade association with a technical focus, and our membership includes almost all wipes fabrics manufacturers, and many brand owners in North America. We appreciate the opportunity to provide input on House Bill 268. We urge the committee to consider amending the legislation and instead pass labeling standards for non-flushable wipes, which would align Hawaii with action taken on this important issue with California, Illinois, Oregon, and Washington. INDA and its members recognize that municipal wastewater treatment facilities are having difficulties with consumers flushing certain wipes that were not designed nor labeled to be disposed of in the toilet, and we're committed to being part of the solution to that challenge. As such, we support the general objective of addressing wipes that are causing problems in wastewater treatment systems. However, formal forensic studies of sewer systems in New York City, Jacksonville, Florida, and the United Kingdom have repeatedly shown that 98 to 99% of the materials clogging such sewer systems are hygiene products that are not labeled as flushable. Specifically, these studies show that consumers are improperly flushing non-flushable products like baby wipes, sanitizing wipes, and non-wipe products like paper towels, feminine hygiene products, and fats, oils, and grease. Given that the inappropriate consumer disposal of non-flushable wipes is a primary source of sewer system challenges, our industry has worked cooperatively with wastewater treatment stakeholders throughout the country to jointly develop legislation that focuses on mandating
And
enhanced
Wes,
do
we
not
do
flush
have
labeling.
we do have your written testimony, so please don't read the whole thing, please summarize. Thank you.
Just wanted to summarize a few things. We've worked with wastewater in many other states. I'll also note that flushable wipes are generally specialty products like medicated hemorrhoidal wipes and feminine health wipes, and they're only 7% of the market. So we would urge and stand on our written testimony regarding labeling of non-flushable products to bring Hawaii into with what California, Oregon, Washington, Illinois have done, and I'm happy to facilitate any technical conversations with folks on the industry side and anyone in Hawaii who's a stakeholder on this issue, and happy to provide any additional information or answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And then we have testimony from 5 additional individuals in support, 1 in opposition. Is there anyone else here to testify on this measure? If not, members, any questions? All right. Oh, go ahead.
Ted, how do you tell the difference between a flushable wipe and a non-flushable wipe if you're at the sewage treatment plant?
The ones that are clogging up the system, I think, are not flushable.
Bingo.
Right.
Is this a matter of identity crisis, mislabeling, that these things that are not flushable are actually putting labels of being flushable? Do we know what the standards are?
I think the problem is that the public thinks that wipes are flushable, and a lot of them aren't. And so they're putting a lot of stuff into the toilets that shouldn't go there, including things that are considered to be flushable that aren't. And mere labeling, I think, given the way the public responds, I don't think mere labeling will take care of the problem.
Or the supervision. What was the gentleman? Thank you, Ted. I want to go back to the industry guy. Sir.
Hi. Yes, sir.
What is the standards to get a label that says it's flushable, or is it it's a marketing issue that what you regulate? So you just stick flushable on the label.
There's 2 different standards. One is called IWFSG. It's on the wastewater side. There's a standard on the industry side. They all meet one of 2 standards. There's ongoing work with the International Standards Organization to ISO, which you may have heard of, to create an ISO standard on flushability. So these flushable wipes meet one of 2 standards. It would be a brand owner would not put out a flushable wipe. They would risk severe reputational harm if they put out a flushable wipe that did not meet a standard. I will add, the problem of needing to tackle non-flushable products. This bill as written would not do that. It would ban the sale of flushable wipes, which are engineered to break down in water. They're short fibers. They're made of organic fibers, whereas non-flushable wipes are not.
What percentage
always.
what percentage of the flushable wipes are deteriorated, destroyed, or otherwise totally like toilet paper becoming?
So they're engineered.
The sound is flushing
studies
out
that
here.
98. We find that 98. Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
We find that 98% to 99 or so in these collection studies are of these clogs are of the non-flushable products that don't fall apart in water. And the fragments we find of the flushable products are generally small fragments that were encapsulated in those non-flushable products.
So this is a bum rap on the flushable wipes, then you're saying?
We're saying that, yeah, they're specialty products. They're engineered to fall apart, and it's really the non-flushable products. Our members manufacture both, and we want, as industry, to make sure consumers are making smart decisions with what they're flushing. We don't want them flushing things like baby wipes that were not designed to go down the toilet.
And your studies indicate unequivocally the things that are clogging these sewer treatment plants are the non-flushables.
Yep, so as I mentioned, there's links in our written testimony to those studies that the 98 or 99% in these cities, Jacksonville, Florida, New York City, and the United Kingdom, these are almost exclusively non-flushable products.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any
Thank you.
further questions, members?
Well, I have a
Go ahead.
comment. So yeah, I learned the hard way, and after a $5,000 plumbing bill, realized the flushables, they flush, but they don't break down, and they start clogging up your drain. And so, one of the testimonies, and I don't think they're in the room though, mentioned, so when my mom had become bedridden, it was definitely an indispensable product to use for a person in that situation. So I think education would be a really key point here if we can't change
Can we, we do have a chance for discussion.
Okay.
when we do decision making. If you don't have a
All right.
question, to be consistent.
Yeah, okay, got
For
it.
all committee members,
Got
let's.
Sure.
Sometimes I break the rule, but we'll
That-
try to
that
narrow
raises
the
a-
comments.
That raises another question to the gentleman. Mr. Fisher, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
I want to label my product flushable. Do I have to meet any criteria or any inspection or any test or any something? Because what our colleague just said is, hey, these were flushable, and they plugged up $5,000 worth of plumbing services.
So as I mentioned, there's two separate standards. They would be tested by an independent lab.
And I
You would
didn't
have to-
understand what your two separate standards were, but the point is, can you label it the way you see it versus somebody's going to say you're going to meet a test like organics, got to have a test if you're going to label something organic, et cetera?
The manufacturers are generally, they're going to be, these wipes are engineered to break down if they're marketed as flushable. At least that's the way.
But you don't meet a standard to put that on your label, is my point. It sounds like they do it as their marketing indicates.
But again, they would be facing large class action lawsuits if they were marketing products that shouldn't be flushed.
okay, I
So,
see the
so they
social
take
pressure.
extra care to ensure they're not doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thanks. I guess, okay, one follow-up question. Is it possible that the existence of flushable wipes might lead to additional flushing of non-flushable wipes?
Is that to me?
Is it possible? Yeah.
So as I mentioned, flushable wipes are very specialty
quick
products.
question.
So I don't know. I think I think people would flush without proper education. I think they would continue to flush things like baby wipes because they're the cheapest out there and they're the most often purchased wipe. These are specialty medicated wipes in some cases. There's only 7% of the market. Before I started this role, I wasn't aware that there were some of those wipes. So yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it. And we did note your testimony. We have a deadline tonight, so we may not wholly rewrite the bill in this committee, but I did take note that there's been efforts in other states to address this more comprehensively, and I think that's the way to go. I appreciate that. So we'll make sure we make that note in the committee report at least. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next up, any further questions, members? All right, seeing none, we will move on to House Bill 913 relating to the Natural Energy Laboratory of Hawaii Authority. So this amends the statutory duties of NELHA to include conducting activities in a culturally appropriate and environmentally responsible manner, adding a component for community outreach and education in the community in which they're located, hopefully, and then adding membership to the Board of Directors to include a member representing the University of Hawaii Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, and then one member of the already existing board members to be a cultural practitioner from the Ahupua'a of O'Omar Kalawa. First up to testify, we have Greg Barber from NELHA.
Thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, members of the committee. I'm Greg Barber, Executive Director of the Natural Energy Lab, and in the interest of time, I'll stand on my testimony and available for any comments.
Thank you. And then Ted Bolin, Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition.
Thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Bolin for Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition. I think it's entirely appropriate that NELHA act in an environmentally appropriate manner. Its current mission is to develop these energy sources. I know from my experience as Deputy Attorney General that not everything that happens out at NELHA can be described as environmentally appropriate, and so I think it's important to include this. So I urge you to pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Pono Advocacy on Zoom, not present. In support, Hawaii Island Ocean Advocates, Nicole Larson in support, Cindy Punihali Kennedy in support, and Thomas Daniel, one individual in support. That's two individuals. I read everyone's name this time. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? If not, members, any questions?
Chair.
Rep Board, go ahead.
Brief question to NELHA. Are you already doing this? Are you doing anything environmentally inappropriate? Because it says to do environmentally conscious kind of things. Where is it coming from? I guess that maybe that's part of the question.
I could speculate where this bill may be coming from, but I don't know if that's appropriate.
Okay.
It may be more related to animal welfare issues, perhaps, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either, actually. If that's code, I missed it entirely. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Members, any further questions? All right, if not, we will move on to the last bill on our agenda relating to energy. This requires the Public Utilities Commission to administer an EV charging system loan program to provide loans to applicants to install EV charging systems. And first up to testify is we have Department of Budget and Finance with comments, the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission, who patiently sat through this entire hearing, just waiting for this bill.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Cochran, and members of the committee. My name is Grace Ralph. I'm with the PUC. We stand our written testimony, but are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Big Island Electric Vehicle Association in support. Hawaii EV Association in support. Climate Protectors Hawaii.
Thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Boland with the Climate Protectors Hawaii. We need to transition to electric vehicles in order to meet our greenhouse gas targets. The lack of a charging infrastructure is a large barrier to reaching that goal. This is one way to help overcome that barrier, and we are in strong support of the measure. Available for questions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then Ulupono Initiative in support, and then additionally 19 individuals in support and 2 in opposition. Oh wait, we had Matt Geyer signed up to testify in person in support. And that is all the written testimony submitted. Anyone else here to testify on this measure in person or on Zoom? If not, members, any questions? Rep Board?
Yes, Chair. Yes, the one who sat through the whole hearing. Do you guys have other loan programs? You got MBAs and other people who have got loaning, banking experience to do this program?
No, I do not believe that we do. That's why in our testimony, we are recommending a slight modification to the language in the measure.
Such as?
To allow us to contract out with a second administrator to help us administer the program, somebody that has
You mean
experience
like
in
a Bank of
administering.
Hawaii or a First Hawaiian Bank or that kind of thing, or?
I think we'd want to explore, but someone that comes to mind is the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, which I understand already administers loan programs for government agencies, and they have a memorandum of understanding to be able to do such work for government agencies.
Thank you for being very frank about that. It's a good program, but to be with you guys that you don't do banking and other stuff, I think is pushing you under the water a little bit there.
Yeah, well, we already administer the EV charging program in conjunction with Hawaii Energy, so we've contracted out with Hawaii, or they're a third-party administrator for the program as it currently stands, and we think it could be beneficial to have some additional support for them given the unique nature of the loan program that's proposed.
Do you have any MBAs in your department?
MBAs?
Yes.
I'm not sure. I would have to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? All right, if not, we will recess for decision making. We'll be back shortly. All right, we are back reconvening for decision-making, the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection, 9:15 a.m. agenda. House Bill 345, we're going to defer this, noting that the same language is already in House Bill 197, and I think with that suggestion to incorporate a sunset date on that once the 2024 building code models are adopted could solve any concerns that have with that. So I think we don't need to duplicate this, so we'll defer this at this time. Any discussion, members? All right, we will move on. House Bill 1292, waste to energy, we had a good discussion. We did get that number, 150,000 tons a year, which I was able to punch that into my calculator. It's 411 tons per day of ash from H-Power goes in the landfill. Clearly that is fewer tons than the actual trash were to go in the landfill, but it's also highly toxic. And so it's not, H-Power is not making the waste disappear, I think is the point. Just noting the discussion that we had, and there is a Senate bill still moving to continue this discussion. We're going to also defer this at this time. Any discussion, members? Great. HB 835, again, we had a good discussion, a lot of testimony and opposition. We're going to also defer this measure. Getting on to the bills we are passing. House Bill 85, this already has a defective date, so we will move this forward as is. Members, this is the single-use plastic hotel toiletries bill. Any discussion, members? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Voting on HB 85, Chair elects to pass as is, correct, Chair?
Yes.
And Chair and Vice Chair both vote ayes. And noting excused absence of Mr. Gates, Rep. Kahaloa. Oh,
Aye.
HB 85. Rep. Peruso.
Aye.
And excused is Rep. Woodson and Rep. Ward. Voting yes, thumbs up. Yes, aye. Chair, your measure is adopted.
Great, thank you. Next is House Bill 756 relating to land use. This is the voluntary relocation managed retreat bill. We will make technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, and adopt the amendments suggested by DLNR regarding state and county hazard mitigation plans and OPSD just regarding consistency in the statute. And already has a defective date, so with that, we'll move this forward. Any discussion, members? Rep. Ward?
Chair, I have a no vote for two reasons, which I will explain. One is principle and the other is conscience. First, the principle that I'm voting no on is that we have millionaires on the beachfront who are going to get a relocation with a fund and have acquirable lands through the state, but yet we've got 28,000 Hawaiians who don't even have a home, and we are bending over backwards for these people, which we have an indefinite future where these people have no houses whatsoever. I just think it's a misplaced priority. It's an insult to the Hawaiian community, and I think this is where we have forgotten the host culture and what obligations were to be, and now we've jumped the line and put millionaires who live on the beach already, and I don't think there's too many Hawaiians who are living on the beach legally with ownership. I think it's the unconscionable part of it, and it's the principle that we're giving this as priority over what otherwise is a very, very difficult situation for the last 100 years with the Hawaiian issue. And we have not relocated them onto the land, but we're going to relocate the millionaires who live on the ocean to make them safer, whereas the other people who are the highest houseless population in the state of Hawaii. Other than that, I have no strong feelings about the bill.
Thank you. I think given that, thank you for your comments. I think we can add a note to the committee report that we note there's concerns about, whether this program would be geared towards primarily aiding low and moderate income households or protecting properties that are in the public interest, like beaches that everybody uses. But we won't make any amendments to that nature in the text of the bill right now because I think we have to discuss it with the lead chair first. Any further discussion, members? Rep. Perso.
I'm just going to have to vote with reservations.
Any further discussion?
Chair, I appreciate that committee comment that you made to put in the report, and I think that's very important, and that helps me in my decision to vote up on this.
Thank you. And if not further discussion, Vice Chair, please take the vote. Unless you have discussion, go ahead.
No, I'm for moving this forward, but again, I shared my comments about other tools in the toolkit that we must focus on also. So with that, I'm ready for the vote?
Ready for the vote?
Yeah, ready for the vote. Okay,
Thank you.
voting on HB 756. Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote ayes. And noting excused absences of Reps Gate and Woodson. Anyone voting no or with reservations? No for Mr. Ward. Kahaloa, Rep. Kahaloa.
I'm an aye.
Aye. And Ms. Peruso?
Reservations.
With reservations. Chair, your measure, measure is adopted.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is House Bill 268 relating to disposable wipes. For now, we're going to just affect the date on this bill to keep the discussion going, but we will note in the committee report the testimony just that this bill potentially could look at work done in other states and take a more developed approach. There's just not, I think, time given we have a 9 p.m. deadline tonight to keep bills, get committee reports filed, not time to completely rewrite the bill at this time. But we would recommend if it continues to move forward that we would urge the introducer to put some work into looking at that. With that, members, any discussion?
Sure.
Yes.
And just following up my learning the hard way that these things, maybe they might be flushable, but they don't break down in the end. And there has been studies that point to that fact as a true fact. So I'm hoping that if maybe on a federal level, we need to really get the labeling aspect and some standards created to make sure what they claim is flushable really is, and not just flushable, but it breaks down, to a level that works through the sewer system and our plumbing system. So that's my thoughts on that, but yeah, we got to start somewhere.
Thank you.
Sure, if I
agree.
could supplement that.
Sure.
I think it's truth in advertising. If it's advertised as breakable, which the gentleman says that it is, it should be, and there needs to be some policing. That is clearly the case. Thank you.
All right, if no further discussion, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Voting on HB 268, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair both vote aye. Are there, noting excused absences of Reps Gates and Woodson, any members voting no or with reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you. For House Bill 913 relating to NELHA, we're going to make a number of amendments. Let me also say we're going to defect the date to June 30th, 3000 to encourage further discussion and include technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. So adding that in before I forget to say it. And then going through the changes, it's kind of in the bill, it sort of interchangeably says culturally sensitive, appropriate, responsible, environmentally sensitive, responsible. So we'll make that language consistent throughout where that's mentioned for things to be environmentally responsible and culturally appropriate. On page 2, 1A, where it mentions research and development, we're going to add a provision that says, provided that research proposals involving live animals be reviewed by the University of Hawaii's IACUC prior to any lease approval. And then at the end of page 2, beginning of stage 3, we're going to strike out this consistent with state's commitment to Malama Hawaii, because that's not really a statutorily defined term. So I think saying environmentally responsible and culturally appropriate is enough. We're going to just make some, on page 3, line 14, that's subsection 8, we're going to just make some style changes to the language here, but we're also going to include a provision to clarify that we're looking at engaging in community outreach and education within West Hawaii. And then we're going to add aquaculture, in with science, technology, engineering, and math. We'll include aquaculture. And then we'll strike out the provision that says we'll strike out free programs, although we presume they would mostly be free. We just think that restriction may not be necessary in certain cases. And then we're going to strike through the language that was added on the top of page 4 about providing space and opportunities for gathering, because as we understand that this is already happening at NELHA. And then instead of adding any new members to the board, we'll keep it at 12. We'll strike out the additional language added on page 4, lines 10 and 11, to say at least one member should be a cultural practitioner representing Ahupua'a, Va'o'om, and Kaloa, but we're going to leave in the language that adds Native Hawaiian cultural practices and tradition, conservation, and animal welfare as kind of one of the selection criteria for board members broadly. And then we'll strike through the specific addition of a member of University of Hawaii's IACUC to the committee, because we covered that in saying the research proposal should be reviewed by the IACUC. And then we'll defect the date, which I think I already said. So with that, members, any discussion? All right, if not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Voting on HB 913, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. I'm noting excused absences of Reps. Gates and Woodson. At this time, any members voting no or with reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you. And then last bill on the agenda, House Bill 1415, relating to energy. We're going to move this forward with a defective date of June 30th, 3000 to encourage further discussion. And we will come back to, further refining this, I think, at a later time. With that, members, any discussion? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Voting on HB 1415, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Excused are Reps. Gates and Woodson. At this time, any members voting no or with reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you, and we're adjourned.